We're live on a Sunday morning once again, bringing you an informative hour of Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali. Our guests today take us through some of the theories that have emerged as being behind the Tshwane protests. What does Brexit mean exactly to South Africa? Well, do stay tuned to find out more. We talk about youth and entrepreneurship with the Minister of Small Business Development as we wrap up our Youth Month discussions. And of course, we close off the show by zooming into the Commission on Gender Equality's report on a very controversial bursary for virgins, but it's 900 hours Central African time. Good morning. These are the news headlines. Tributes have started pouring in following the death of Limpopo agricultural MEC Joy Matsoge. She was killed in a car crash outside Mokopane in Limpopo on her way to Gauteng last night. ANC Youth League President Colin Maine has called on its mother body to allow more young people into its leadership. Maine shared the stage with President Jacob Zuma at the League's national rally in Durban yesterday. And a great turnaround as Bafana overcame stern resistance from a determined Botswana side to win the 2016 COSAFA Cup with a 3-2 victory at the Sam Nujoma Stadium in Namibia last night. Well, gracing us with their presence this morning is Ms. Tswaki Shweshwe with our weekly digital news trend. Good morning, Tswaki.
Good morning, Alicia.
All right. And of course, we also have on the main discussion, Mr. Mondli Makhanya. He's a City Press editor, as well as political analyst, Mr. Dumsani Hlope. Gentlemen, a very good morning to both of you. Welcome to the show.
Good morning to you, and good morning to the viewers.
All right, you're going to be with them in a short while, but what has gotten you very, very busy on the digital front this week?
So this week it's been very interesting. We saw the Tshwane unrest taking a very big space in the digital media platform and the social media platforms, and we saw Brexit coming out towards the end of the week, and it's been very interesting. So let's start with the Brexit quickly, because now there's a petition and they have reached at least just under 2 million signatures saying that we need to retake this referendum. We'll see how it goes, but they have voted. And Stephen Woods says, "Dear young people, I was 10 years old when all people decided my future in 1975. At least we made the right decision." So, you know, maybe alluding to the fact that if this referendum was retaken as there is a petition, perhaps the votes would come out differently. We'll see how it goes. And we know the British Prime Minister David Cameron has said that, well, I am going to resign. And he's gone out to thank those that participated and voted for the UK to stay in the European Union. But as we know, that vote lost. And, well, this is what he's saying. After his resignation, the question is, who will take over from him? So we'll see how that one goes.
What else kept you busy this week?
The Tshwane unrest.
Absolutely.
5 people dead, scores arrested. So we'll see how that one goes or how the story develops. We know Tagoti Diza work continues. She's carrying on the campaign trail as the ANC's mayoral candidate for Tshwane. And I want to read just a few tweets. Here's Zelda Larkhansi saying, "I don't understand if you are unhappy with the political move, why private property people have to suffer in some instances more." And this is the hand of our SABC reporter, Horisani Sitole, who got beat in Mabopane in one of those protests. So because we saw that the protests did turn violence and journalists were not exempted from the anger of the community members. So we'll see how that one goes. 5 people dead, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it on the show.
Coming up on the show. But what else made you talk this week on digital
Okay,
media?
so that's Metogoti Diza there. They dressing her up in one of the trails that she went. She went to Kwandebele. So, you know, already blending into the culture of Tshwane.
Yes.
But it's been a great weekend for South Africans, and this is what everyone is talking about, that we've done so well. Bafana got the COSAFA Cup.
Yes.
The Springboks won that test series. And then Black Coffee also made us proud by getting that BET award, becoming the first South African rather,
Big
to
up to
get
him.
the BET award. And so well done to Bafana Bafana. And the sad thing is this, Alicia, Bafana Bafana is not trending because people are just so skeptical, saying, well, I can't believe it. Is it a prank? Did
Look,
they
a lot
really
of them
win?
were saying that they didn't even know that Bafana Bafana was playing. But what are they saying on social media?
You know, so here's Mfundo Gaqopa saying, good morning in the name of Bafana Bafana. And actor, director, and everything else, Florence Masebe, saying, I've forgotten what it's like to celebrate a Bafana Bafana win. I keep thinking we're being pranked. So you can see, this is the feel that people have. But yeah, you're not pranked. Bafana Bafana got it, so Rio, here we come.
All right, what else was it big in terms of news this week, Nzwag?
Okay, so this is towards the end of the week, and you know we had that the spy tape issue
Yes.
coming up on the top on social media. So there were quite a lot of conversations going on this week, Alicia.
All right, what did they say in terms of the spy tapes?
Okay, so on the spy tapes, I wasn't able to pull up some stories here, but we'll see as time goes on how it will progress, this case. And Alicia, at the end of this, we're going to publish the stories up for our viewers at home to be able to follow up.
All right, where can they get them?
If you go onto our Twitter timeline at Media Monitor, you'll be able to get the stories, and also we'll put it up on our SABC News website, sabcnews.com.
All right, that is our digital news lady, Miss Ntswakwe Shweshwe. We'll see her again next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, gentlemen, a very good morning to you once again. But briefly, what was your hashtag for the week? What was your biggest story? And let's understand how you covered the Tshwane protests, Mundla.
Well, that was undoubtedly the biggest story domestically. Tshwane, the explosion was something that nobody really anticipated that it would explode to that level. I think we all expected a reaction to Thoko Tuteza being appointed, that they would be resisted by the local people, but not the extent of the violence that lasted the whole week and actually claimed 5 lives and millions of rands. So we covered the story in terms of, by the end of the week, we've seen all the images, we've seen all the burnings, and it's been covered on radio, it's been covered on television, it's been covered in the papers and on digital platforms. So as a Sunday newspaper, what you have to do, you have to go behind the story now. What lay behind it? What does it mean? And there had been accusations about who instigated. So we tried to get behind the scenes and actually get to the bottom of that.
We're going to pick your brain more on that when we discuss that topic. But Dumsani, what was your biggest news in terms of what was trending this week?
Well, the Tshwane issue for me was the biggest news, but some of us being in the political analysis space, the question is, what is the source of this? And
We're going to talk about that.
What is the status of the ANC and where's the ANC going? I think that for me, that was the important issue. But then also there was some serious violence monthly in Guyana, which did not necessarily enjoy too much coverage, and it got an element of xenophobic because apparently it's something that emerged out of the killing of a local boy by foreigners. Apparently this boy tried to steal something in one of the shops, and then they dealt with him, and it sparked some serious violence. But it was not necessarily covered in the mainstream
But why,
media.
Mr. Editor at Large, was this story not covered?
I think the reason is very simple. The violence that happened in Tshwane happened in the capital. It was right at the doorstep of power. And it followed on the back of violence that had happened elsewhere in the country related to the elections. We are in election mode. And you had a situation in the story that we've covered, where there were even fears among government that government institutions may actually fall prey to the violence that was happening there. So it was a very visual story. Guyana, unfortunately, is 300 kilometers away from Johannesburg.
So it fell short of coverage.
But there was also violence on the West Rand related to elections. That also basically played second fiddle. But I mean, the key thing is the capital was under siege, and you cannot beat that.
All right, well, we're going to take a very quick ad break, and when we return, we're going to ask what exactly instigated those Tshwane protests. Do stay with us.
She has always been somebody who says whatever she wanted to say. She speaks her mind, but she was influential in the sense that she started there as a very young hope when she was still in her 20s. And you can realize that at that time she was still trying to find herself, and now she became the giant that she ultimately became. And it is through people like her that we have got women now in broadcasting, because she was one of the first few women who were in broadcasting and were able to appear on television, because previous to that it was only men that were on television.
Usisiwe Jamsana, SABC News, Alice.
Mzondi Lembech, SABC News, Doha, Qatar.
Kunatipingwa SABC News, Alice.
Diabo Seto, SABC News, Geneva, Switzerland.
Nampumelo Siziba, SABC News, Moscow, Russia.
Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Craig Murray, SABC News, Stellenbosch.
We bring the news back home. We keep the nation fully informed.
This is Media Monitor. Welcome back. Dominating all media platforms this week is, of course, the Tshwane protest. The basis of the violent protest that saw at least 5 people dead, allegedly due to the refusal of Togo Didiza as the city's mayoral candidate. But let's hear from those who were against this appointment.
What is happening? It's totally violent and we are not accepting it. But what we can say, it has exposed the police service in our country that it's very weak. The police service in our country is very weak to such a point that when they get to a place whereby they are vandalizing, they just stand there. We went to different locations around Mamelodi. Police were there. On the presence of the police, people were still looting. How can you allow such an act while you are a police service? You are there to protect the community. But if you allow such instances, then it's a very much problem. It's a question to the standard of our police service.
It's very shocking what is happening here, because we didn't expect such things to happen, and we would like to call upon for the government and the police and the community to work together so that something like this can stop, because we cannot tolerate it, because people are looting here, people are doing vandalism. It's part of a crime.
It's not everybody in Tshwane who feels that because she's a woman, she's a Zulu specifically. Because what we see in the placards that was going around, that she's a Zulu. I think in the ANC we don't promote tribalism.
Gentlemen, this is your platform now. I mean, we've heard so many theories that might have caused the violent protests that we saw in Tshwane. But let's talk about them. Tribalism, patriarchy. I mean, what was the real issue? Starting up with them, sir.
Look, I think the essence of what happened in Tshwane is a question of patronage. There's a strong relationship between being in a government senior position and access and control and distribution of resources. And for me, once you begin to have 2 people contesting for a position viciously, to the extent that neither of them is willing to move and meet each other halfway, or to act in the best interest of the ANC as the organization, then it's an extremely personal issue. And essentially it means the ANC possibly is becoming more individualistic rather than organizational, which is a serious problem. It's more becoming a group rather than a team. And what we saw in Tshwane, for me, it's a manifestation of a failure by the leadership of the ANC to manage the internal dynamics of the ANC in between elections. Because what happens is an eruption of what has been a problem throughout the 5-year period. And for me, it speaks to the inability to manage leadership and the internal risk assessment, and therefore the ability to deal with situations within the ANC internally. So what we saw, it has very little to do with tribalism, by the way, from where I'm sitting. I think it's the inability to manage internal dynamics within the ANC. And it's the same inability that has resulted in the formation of COPE, of the EFF, the breakaway of NUMSA from the Alliance, and the United Front that's coming out. All of these things, for me, are a manifestation of the failure to manage internal political risk within the ANC.
You know, I had Mamnumvula Mokonyane here in studio, and we were asking her about, you know, what could have led to these protests. And she did say that, of course, Umam Togo Didiza went through she was put up as a candidate through the party processes, and Ramakopa's name wasn't in the top 3 list that was presented to the community. So then, are we still saying it's internal issues here, Mondli?
No, definitely. I mean, Tumsane is absolutely correct. The Tshwane ANC has been at war for the past 5 years. 2 factions centered roughly around the chairperson and the deputy chairperson. And the ANC at the provincial level and the national level has not been able to manage that conflict. And it's escalated. And a lot of it has had to do with resources. People are saying that basically about who has access to these big coffers that are there in it's one of the biggest municipalities in the country. It's got a massive budget. I really do not believe that the issue of tribalism and patriarchy really played that much of a role in it. It's basically ANC internal dynamics. If Togo Didiza was perceived as an outsider in the political circles of the ANC, and in the leadership circles, she has never played a major leadership role in the regional ANC. Yes, she's a branch leader of one of the branches, but she's always been, her role is, she's been a minister, she's been at the national government level, not necessarily in the cutthroat of ANC politics. The same thing applied to Thandi Modise in the Northwest. She was parachuted into the Northwest and made Premier of the Northwest, having not been part of the leadership collective there. And she had a hard time for all the time that she was there, given a hard time by ANC structures because she was perceived as an outsider politically. And this is exactly what's happened to Togo Didiza. And, you know, the ANC can play stubborn here and push her through. She will probably win, and she will probably become mayor, but her next 5 years will be very, very hard. And I just want to contradict the Nomvula Mokonyane there about her name having come up through the structures. I think the other part of the mismanagement of this process has been the fact that the ANC told the people at branch level, at community level, that we are going to give you power in this process to actually nominate people, and your voice is actually going to matter coming forward.
No, they were choosing the final 3 names that were presented.
Exactly. Then there's somebody who has not necessarily come through that whole process from the branch in Soshanguve, Hammanskraal, and wherever. Her name suddenly appears at the end. And people took that process seriously. People attended community meetings and eventually told people that your voice matters. And in the end, the voice that matters are the voices of the people at the national and provincial leadership. There was going to be a reaction like that.
Tumzan?
I think we must look at the Tshwane issue a bit broader. Because if Mondli, if you look at KZN, that eThekwini region, it's one of those highly contested regions. But when the REC, made a submission to the PEC and the NSA, it was accepted, just like that. The same is applied to Ekurhuleni.
Yes.
It's a highly contested region, but when they submitted the name of Masina, it was accepted. And then here comes, Tshwane. They submit the names, and then the PEC says no. This is not acceptable, and then they engaging the NEC. So there's also been an element of inconsistency within the NEC. But, part of the problem why the ANC is unable to manage internal dynamics is that even the senior leadership, they also depend on these factions to remain in senior position and to access government positions. So, for example, if you look at Gwede Mantashe, there are very strong possibilities that he does want to be re-elected. So the extent that he wields a stick is also dependent to the extent that he also wants to move higher within the echelons. The entire top 6 for that matter. And I think for me, the biggest problem is that we are reaching a stage where accessibility within the ruling party to senior government position is no longer dependent on the ability to perform, but is dependent on belonging to a strong affection, which means we probably have reached a ceiling in terms of development because we are no longer looking at the ability to perform. From where I'm sitting, I think Mondli Kongubele has done significantly to be retained as a mayor. I think Spotler has also done significantly, to warrant being retained. But because the affections did not win, they are out of the window. So if we are going to have people getting into leadership position based on factions rather than performance, then the NDP is in crisis. I think that's the worst part for me.
You know what I found interesting? I mean, when Mamtoko Didiza was doing the walkabout, I think on Friday, she was talking to the street vendors. And a lot of people, community members, were saying that they were worried about the fact that they thought that she wasn't going to continue on some of the projects that Uramakhopa had embarked on. And she tried to allay those fears, saying that, she's going to continue where they left off, Mondli.
You see, that is a major problem that happens when there's a change of order, change of face in the
But should it garner
ANC.
protests and violent ones at that?
No, because people have become accustomed to the fact that when there's a new minister comes in, the new minister comes in with new programs, and the new minister comes in with new people and different priorities, different programs, and it changes. When a new mayor comes in, as if there's been a change of party. And people actually, they were voicing their previous experience. And actually, and I think that, but a lot of it had to do with what the word that Dumisani mentioned. It's patronage. There are people who actually now, if somebody else comes in, they feel that they will no longer be able to plug into the networks that were there before.
All right, Mondi, let's hear what people at home are saying on our social media network there. Let's see if we have those tweets there. Neopeko says, not a dime. This is democracy, and it gives you many other options with your ex as the biggest weapon by far. Use it. Yes, that is Mpo is slick. I can't really see that properly, but it says AM Live, yes, an ex at a voting booth is the greatest weapon we have, not a book of matches full of fire sticks. MacGyver says, if our media can show good things done in ANC government, I think people will understand better the role of our government. And Ina Potgieter says, this is so very unfortunate. My heart is going out to all the families who suffered a loss. And of course, last but not least, Stanley Mahola says she must go for it. And all right, I can't see what the rest of the tweet says there, but thank you so much for all your contributions this morning. She must go for it and inspire other women of South Africa. We're going to take a quick ad break, and after that, what will be the implication of the Brexit? Do stay right there. This is Media Monitor.
The commission had announced that they were going to investigate, we also went around to the communities to find out what their views, because this is a mandate. It's not what the councillors or the mayor sat in the corner and decided that it has to happen. It came from the community of Uthugela. So the community still feel that we are on the right track. In fact, we've been told in our IDP roadshows that we should not do away with the maiden bursary, because the community feels that it is addressing the issues that are a challenge in our municipality.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, Britain requires a new leadership, and those were the words of outgoing British Prime Minister David Cameron during the announcement of his resignation on Thursday following a defeat of his Remain in the EU campaign. The decision by Britons to exit the EU was not without repercussions, as the country's currency plunged to its lowest in 30 years.
I fought this campaign in the only way I know how, which is to say directly and passionately what I think and feel, head, heart and soul. I held nothing back. I was absolutely clear about my belief that Britain is stronger, safer and better off inside the European Union. And I made clear the referendum was about this and this alone, not the future of any single politician, including myself. But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction. I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination. This is not a decision I've taken lightly. But I do believe it's in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required. There is no need for a precise timetable today, but in my view we should aim to have a new Prime Minister in place by the start of the Conservative Party conference in October. Delivering stability will be important, and I will continue in post as Prime Minister with my Cabinet for the next 3 months. The Cabinet will meet on Monday. The Governor of the Bank of England is making a statement about the steps that the Bank and the Treasury are taking to reassure financial markets. We will also continue taking forward the important legislation that we set before Parliament in the Queen's speech. And I've spoken to Her Majesty the Queen this morning to advise her of the steps that I'm taking. A negotiation with the European Union will need to begin under a new Prime Minister. And I think it's right that this new Prime Minister takes the decision about when to trigger Article 50 and start the formal and legal process of leaving the EU. I will attend the European Council next week to explain the decision the British people have taken and my own decision. The British people have made a choice. That not only needs to be respected, but those on the losing side of the argument, myself included, should help to make it work. Britain is a special country. We have so many great advantages. A parliamentary democracy where we resolve great issues about our future through peaceful debate. A great trading nation with our science and arts, our engineering and our creativity respected the world over. And while we are not perfect, I do believe we can be a model of a multiracial, multi-faith democracy where people can come and make a contribution and rise to the very highest that their talent allows. Although leaving Europe was not the path I recommended, I am the first to praise our incredible strengths. I've said before that Britain can survive outside the European Union, and indeed that we could find a way. Now the decision has been made to leave, we need to find the best way. And I will do everything I can to help. I love this country, and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed.
Well, gentlemen, it seemed like nobody was expecting Britain to vote out of the EU. What was your reactions? I mean, we saw the global markets plummeting there. Mondli.
What surprised me was that right up until a few days before, the exit guys were actually leading. And then suddenly, on the last 2-3 days, the polls swung, and then it was neck and neck, and it seemed as if the Remain people were in the ascendancy. And I think that's what gave people that much confidence, and that's what resulted in the shock on Friday, when it actually seemed that the margin was now, it was a 4 percentage point margin, and it was actually, which is, may seem neck and neck, but it's actually quite big, because I mean, like, it means that, I mean, like, you actually have so many people, and so many bigoted people and narrow-minded people in a country who actually, because the main message of the exit people was, we do not like immigrants.
Absolutely,
yeah,
yes.
It was a negative message, and it was a very myopic message. And a country which is supposed to be one of the progressive countries in the world and is actually rejecting modernity. And I think the economic implications of it, and because people had been so relaxed saying that Brits couldn't possibly vote that way, they couldn't possibly vote that way, and that's when I think that's what resulted in the big shock on Friday, which then people then kind of like the markets reacted so badly, the pound reacted so badly, and markets elsewhere in the world, basically people realizing that now they were going to deal with having to deal with the reality of a divided Europe.
It was interesting because we always associate being educated and smart with how people vote. True. And in this particular case, it did not follow that, that sequence. I think Prime Minister David Cameron, I think he took a very big risk. I thought he thought that given the debates within his party and across UK, whether they should stay or get out of the EU, he thought, let me shut up this thing and put a referendum. And it has actually backfired, because there are a lot of prime ministers that were there prior to him who also went through the same debates, but they never put it to a referendum. But he decided that, look, let me just shut up people here. And then it was a gamble, which he did not win. But I think what won the Leave campaign is possibly xenophobic tendencies. It's a question of migration. A whole lot of people from Syria and the Middle East that are flocking throughout the Europe.
Everybody's citing that reason.
Yes, there's no other economic or political rationale far much stronger than the fear of the Brits that they were increasingly being crowded by, foreigners coming in. It's a very interesting issue because it means Donald Trump in the US can also win the presidential race, because he has also made the whole question of migration and terrorism and Islamic extremism part of the campaign, which has very little to do with the economic performance in the US. So that is highly possible. But then the question is, if David Cameron can gamble and then things go wrong and then he resigns, shouldn't that be a lesson to a whole lot of leaders elsewhere, that when they have their foot wrong, they should also resign?
Mondli, I mean, a lot of people were asking, what does then the Brexit mean for particularly South Africa? Does it mean that now the deals that we currently have in place need to be renegotiated?
Well, it is a complicated process because it's not immediate. They have a 2-year window in which to renegotiate with Europe about exactly what the relationship is going to be with Europe. And so there's going to be 2 years of uncertainty. And that's going to be a damaging thing in itself, because nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, what any other trading bloc's relationship with Europe is going to be, what your relationship with Britain is going to be. But I think that's going to be the primary thing. All the treaties that we have signed with Europe, which are now going to have to go back to the drawing board. And those treaties do not take 3 days to negotiate. They take ages. And bits and pieces, and they are negotiated at a certain point in time when economic circumstances are a certain way. So it's an investment in the future in a way. So that's going to be a very complicating thing. So the uncertainty that's going to be there is going to complicate a lot of things. And then our relationship with Britain as well, because we may have our own bilateral relations, but a lot of the bilateral relations we have with Britain are actually relations with Europe. And then there's an issue, particularly now, not just South Africa, but with the AU and SADC and so on. We have issues of development aid, for instance.
Yes.
Britain contributes about 10% of the EU budget. And that's 10% out of the EU budget. And many poor countries are going to feel it. We may not feel it because we're not dependent on aid, but many of our neighbors will feel it, and it will actually affect.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Mundli, because a lot of people were saying that the AU should actually take note and realize that, you know what, maybe it's time to be independent. Dumsan?
The AU?
Yes.
The African Union?
Yes.
Look, that question has actually got into my small head for several times. But you see, I don't think the AU has been too strong in terms of integration and coordination to the extent that the sovereignty of individual countries has been ceded to the AU, which is one of the problems in this country. And besides, I think individually African countries have got a whole lot stronger relation with their former colonizers than with each other. And for me, that's the sad part. This is why development, in the continent remains, an elusive target, simply because even the new rulers that take over after independence, institutionally, they get caught up in relations that serve the former colonizers. But looking at the exit of the Britain and Montreal, part of me says that capital interests, they always adjust to different situations.
Yes.
I don't necessarily, I think for a moment there'll be that sense of deja vu, but in a very long time, capitalists have got a very strong ability to redirect and reconfigure themselves and strive over time.
We'll see what Mr. Johnson does with if he does make the role of Prime Minister. Let's hear what you're saying on Twitter. Colin Sihlali says, let Britain join BRICS and finish and clar. Let's take some more tweets on that. John S. Jackson says at SA Media Monitor, agree, get it done and dusted. Let France and Germany try glue it together like Humpty Dumpty. I think not. See how many stay. Raising some serious issues there. SA Problem says, given that it took them almost 10 years to get rid of that hate preacher with the hook because of the EU, I'm quite surprised. All right, let's see if we have more tweets on this matter. All right, that's where we leave it with your tweets. We're going to take a very quick ad break and come back with Media Monitor. Do stay with us.
We get an agreement with the employer that we're going to deduct through the payroll, and then they give us the contact details of their employees so that we can get hold of the employees and start agreeing with them that this is how they are going to service their debt. As I said, once we contact them, 99% of people say, we know we owe you NSFAS and we're going to pay. Some are even saying, we're hoping that you're not going to get hold of us.
welcome back. Well, since the beginning of this month, we have been addressing issues related to young people to mark the Youth Month. One of the greatest challenges facing our youth is, of course, the lack of economic opportunities. Entrepreneurship has been identified as an important vehicle to take youth out of the claws of poverty. And for this discussion, we're very honored to be joined by the Honorable Minister of Small Businesses Enterprises, Uma Ulindiwe Zulu. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you for the opportunity, and good morning to your viewers.
Minister, look, I think recently when we started Youth Month, we had the representatives from the national, the NYDA, and it seems that a lot of people seem to lack information when it comes to accessing these very fundamental initiatives that government, like your department, has to try and enrich the youth and move small businesses forward. What has your department done to try and engage with young entrepreneurs?
Well, we've done quite a lot in the 2 years that we've been in office. May I just also say that we do have offices at provincial level, which are not necessarily offices of small business development, but the offices of SIFA, which is our Small Enterprise Finance Agency, as well as SIDA, which is our Small Development Agency. We have offices everywhere, but secondly, we're also trying to see if we can have mobile offices that can be able to move throughout the length and breadth of our country, reaching out in particular to people who are in the township and reaching out to people who are in the rural area so that they can be able to access what government programs are there for supporting small and medium enterprises as well as cooperatives.
But Minister, how do you feel about the lack of economic opportunities among the youth?
Well, the unemployment of young people is a concern for this government of the African National Congress, but I think it's also a global problem. It's not just a South African problem. However, we have identified this as an opportunity for government to go out there and encourage young people in particular to also look at doing or starting their own businesses. Let me tell you, there's thousands of young people who are doing something. There's nothing that is exciting for me as waking up in the morning and I get an SMS from some young person who says, Minister, thank you very much. I requested a SIFA or SIDA to assist me in this and that. It's happening. Minister, just this morning, I also got an SMS of somebody that was looking for equipment, and we supported them in ensuring that they buy that equipment. So that's the start. But this doesn't mean we've managed to reach everybody. And this is where our challenge is, reaching out to everybody. But more than that, it's about the budget too. Because you might have the plans, you might want to do all these things, but do you have enough budget to be able to cover everybody else? And also we must consider the fact that the majority of black people are new in the space. They're competing with a generation of about 5 generations ahead of them. People that were given the opportunity in the past, and now they have to compete with those very same people. But as a department, we are convinced, and I am excited. I'm still as excited as when I was appointed, because almost everywhere I go through the length and breadth of South Africa, I'm finding young people who are not moaning and groaning. I'm finding people who are saying, we want to make it happen. We want you to assist us in ensuring that we start our own businesses or grow our own businesses. So part of our programs focus on young people specifically, focus on women, but also focus on people with disability, because those are the people that are usually left out.
Minister, look, I know you also have one of the smallest departments, and you've done a lot in the short time that you've been given. But I want to understand what some of the projects that you're currently working on that our youth that are watching the show can actually be part of. And I want you to commit to coming back to Media Monitor and giving us a progress report in no time.
Absolutely. We've got quite a number of those programs that are focusing. For instance, we've got emerging enterprise development, and this one in particular is focusing on young people. So those that are at startup level, we are looking at what is it that we can do to support them. And this program is at a cost sharing. We give a grant of the maximum of 200,000 to eligible applicants. That I want to emphasize, because
what is eligible?
Eligible is when you have a plan, when you have a program, or when you have a plan that we can see when we go through it that is a viable program. Because the one thing that government can't afford is to take out this amount of money and the money goes somewhere else other than supporting. And this amount of money is supposed to help to acquire machinery, equipment, tools, raw materials in order for you, including in some cases a vehicle for those that are transporting their goods and so forth, a vehicle to pay. But this money has to be used for what it is meant for. And then we've got another important one is the business rescue strategy. This one is exciting for me because these are people who did not necessarily get support from government. They were out there on their own, but somewhere along the line, they come into difficulty, financial difficulties. Sometimes they're not paid on time by whoever they are supplying, including our own government too.
Yes,
so it's a
yes.
rescue strategy where those that we feel they are falling, we want to support them to get back. And it's not about just money. It's also about training. It's also about supporting them. Then we've got Black Business Supply Development
Very
Program.
quickly, we've run out of time, yes.
Now we've got quite a number of programs that we have in place. And
But
we
where can they get more information, Minister, if I can just cut in there?
Firstly, they have to find out where SIFA and SIDA is.
Okay.
They have those offices. And I mean, accessing our department, we can give you the details of accessing our department. It's not very difficult to do so. But more important is we need to make sure that we work with national, provincial and local structures, because I think that's where the problem lies, the proper coordination between the three spheres of government to be able to have effective systems that can support small and medium
And I know you're on
enterprises.
Instagram, Minister. A lot of people
Yes.
can also be inboxing
Absolutely.
you there. You can follow the
Absolutely.
Minister. She is on Instagram. I'm one of her followers. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us this morning here on Media Monitor. That was the Honourable Minister Lindiwe Zulu with us here in studio, taking us through some of the initiatives that government has to enrich the lives of young entrepreneurs. We're coming back shortly after this. Welcome back. Now, the Commission on Gender Inequality has deemed it unconstitutional the awarding of bursaries to virgins only by the Uthugela District Municipality in KwaZulu-Natal. The municipality established the financial aid scheme for virgins as a means of discouraging young women from premarital sex, among other things. And of course, we are now also joined on this discussion by Umfanozelwe Shozi, the chairperson of the Commission on Gender Equality, and he is, of course, at our Durban studios. But a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us on Media Monitor.
Very good morning to you and to your listeners.
Mr. Shozi, please tell us, how did you get to investigate this issue? Did you receive certain complaints? And if yes, what were the types of complaints that you received on this matter?
The Commission there were a lot of media coverage on the story in January this year. And therefore, the Commission for Gender Equality, on its own accord, investigated the matter. We had people that were going to actually give us their complaints, but they did not. But the law allows us to actually investigate these matters. That's how we've investigated it.
All right. I mean, gentlemen, this bursary scheme was sparked by a lot of debate. Dumsani, I know you're an expert on cultural matters. Do tell us what you thought about this whole investigation.
I thought you were about to say I'm an expert on virginity issues. Look, let me just state up front that I'm in favor of that bursary scheme. I think the question of virginity is not a new thing. It's been there. It's been a cultural issue. I mean, if you go to the reed dance, for example, Eswatini and KZN, part of the essence of the reed dance is a self-preservation. So it has been a serious part of our cultural, heritage, as Africans. Unfortunately, by the way, I think the Human Rights Commission has completely missed the point, because the question of human rights is not just an autonomous, devoid out of cultural and society, context. In Africa, if you look at African philosophy, when you talk about a human right, it's not an individualistic perception. You are human to the extent that you relate to other people. So what the Human Rights Commission did is been to strictly focus on a definition of human rights as a strictly an individualistic issue, and not within the context of African and Africanness. So I think they got it wrong completely. I mean, defining human rights strictly on liberal terms, devoid of African and Africanness, is extremely wrong. So from where I'm sitting, I will definitely say that we need to encourage what that municipality is doing, and encourage a whole lot of young people to appreciate the culture and all that goes with it. So we should never, ever use the doctrine of human rights as a project of alienating Africans from their own identity and cultural context.
Mr. Shoze, I mean, talk to us about your findings. I mean, a lot of people have called them disingenuous, but I mean, what is your stance on the matter? We feel that a lot of people are losing the cultural aspect of this whole thing.
The most important issue, I understand where my brother Tshwane is coming from. South Africa is a constitutional country. We are following constitution. As a country, we've actually chosen to rectify a number of international instruments. And therefore, if you look at Section 9 of the Constitution, it's very clear that the awarding of the bursary was unlawful and is against the Constitution. Even if you go to the South African Constitution, Section 30 and 31 of the South African Constitution states very clearly that even if we practice our own cultural beliefs, that should be inconsistent. That should not be inconsistent with the Constitution. And our findings are very clear. We understand the intentions of the municipality. The municipality, I think all of us will agree that we should reduce teenage pregnancy, HIV and AIDS and so on. But the method of doing that was correct. It's actually placing the burden on young women to actually do that alone. It also discriminates on the basis that as a municipality, as an organ of state, is only awarding a government service to a particular cultural group. And therefore, there are so many other discriminatory measures. The other one is around the issue of pregnancy as well, which is one of the fundamental issues raised by the South African Constitution. As a Gender Commission, we are not using our own issues. We are using Constitution that was actually assented to by the president of this country, approved by our own government. It's also using the international instrument that will rectify by our own government. We are not Eurocentric in any matter on this. And also the point that they're also missing is that this bursary investigation is not about the cultural practice. It's about the relationship between the bursary and virginity. So and therefore, in our own findings, that relationship for us is problematic, and therefore it's really, really discriminatory. So we are not investigating the cultural practice. That's what most of the cultural experts are also saying, to say we are bringing the issue of the cultural practice in directly. The South African law, the Child Act in this country, says that virginity testing is legal in South Africa. If you do it voluntarily and we are over 16, that is allowed. Unless if you do it if you are under 16, that is not allowed. Therefore, we are not saying that virginity testing is unlawful. We are saying the awarding of bursary based on virginity is unlawful. One, it actually excludes a number of people. People who do not even practice that culture. People who are actually maybe were raped or not, who could not even access that. It does not take into consideration other intrinsic factors. Therefore, for us, I think those people, the cultural people as well, are the ones who are disingenuous, wanting to bring in things that we have not brought into the legislation, into the investigation.
Thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Just a quick one, Mondli. I mean, I know we're going. In 30 seconds, what can you say to this matter?
No, look, I think the municipality was coming from the right place. Their intentions were good intentions, because we should be doing everything in our power to to encourage abstinence among young people. But the problem is with the bursary scheme is that, you know, young women are often bullied and manipulated into having sex at an early age by the system, by patriarchy in society, by different power relations. So are you going to discriminate against those who are now no longer virgins because they were they lost their virginity through that? So there are all sorts of things. And then just to, on the constitutionality part of it, we are unfortunately a constitutional state.
All right.
And the ruling has to fall within the constitution and the law.
All right, Mr. Shozi, thank you so much for your time here on Media Monitor. Gentlemen, you've been absolutely amazing. Dumisani, not a virginity expert. That's how we wrap today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We promise to return next week bright and early, live at 900 hours Central African time, bringing you another informative program. AIM News is up next. I'm Alicia Jali. This is SABC News. Have a great Sunday.